Okay, gents, let's focus on the next big topic. That's some big injury news at Chelsea. Christian Pulisic, we know, has been out for a long time. And now Romelu Lukaku and Timo Werner, their two first-choice strikers, have both gone down against Malmo with injuries. So Thomas Tuchel, some of his decisions there are getting questioned about playing those guys in games that they probably could have done without them and won quite comfortably. But focusing on Christian Pulisic first, because this is something we, all three of us, obviously focus on a lot with the US men's national team. He's a key player for Greg Berhalter. The US needs him to be fit and firing to get to the World Cup and then do something at the World Cup. But with this ankle problem he picked up against Honduras, he last played for the USA in September. That's the last time he played, in early September. He last played for Chelsea in early August because he had a positive COVID test and was out for them for a few weeks and then picked up this injury. So he's been out for a long time, and Thomas Tuchel gave a very lengthy injury update on him, and it wasn't great news, to be honest. I'll read out some of it here, but essentially, he's saying that there's not a major injury or complications, but it's simply the pain in his ankle that disturbs him. Pulisic is one of these players with quick movements that once they feel the pain, they're not free in the movement and the recovery is not happening. And then he has to start all over again and over again. And then he reaches a certain point and the pain comes back. And he has to do a pause and start again. So he said right now they're very, very close. He was close to team training last week, but had a setback and a reaction by pain. So, and again, he mentioned that Pulisic is really suffering and he wants to be on the pitch with us. He is very impatient, but unfortunately, this injury takes time. So there's a lot to unpack there, Nick and Andy. My main thing is, how is this going to impact Pulisic? Because we've got some numbers and stats about how many games he's missed and how long he's been out since he's at Chelsea. And I just want to read that out as well, because that's worth pointing out. He's had 11 injuries since he's been at Chelsea. He's missed 38 matches. He's been out for a total of 335 days, and he's only been at Chelsea for a couple of years. So that's almost a year out of injuries that he's missed so far. So, Andy, I'm going to come to you. How will this impact Pulisic? Because he's a very proud player, hard working. He's missed so many games, and it seems just from a playing standpoint, just a pride standpoint, to be almost labeled as someone who's out injured a lot. That's not a good situation for any player, especially a player that's rated so highly like Christian Pulisic is.
Yeah, we know the short runs that he's had at Chelsea in the last kind of 6 months or so. Obviously, he started this season very well, and he had a period about midway through last season where he got hot and then injured once again after that. I struggle to remember, and Nick, maybe you can help me out here. When was the last time that Pulisic, one, played for the national team, and two, really played well? And I'm not talking, he converts a penalty in the Nations League final to win that. I'm talking really over the course of an entire game, just had a consistent impact and effect on what the U.S. men's national team was doing. It feels like it's been a really long time because he's been in some camps, he's been out of most camps. And when he's been in there, the team has been, there's been a lot of shuffling and a lot of, switching of the deck chairs going on. And so there's been no consistency around him. And so it's a little unfair, I think, to probably say, well, he's not been good for them, and therefore, his play should be in question. But it does feel like it's been a while since we've seen the best of Pulisic, and these constant injuries are obviously a factor, and they cannot be helping him. And so I look at this situation as, where is his confidence in his own body now at this point? Is this a situation where we need to talk about, let's give him an extended period? And maybe that doesn't mean a long time, but a couple of weeks, because if we're talking about a few days isn't doing the trick, well, there's obviously something bigger going on here. And so I'm frustrated by it. I imagine he is incredibly frustrated by it. I imagine Tuchel and everybody at Chelsea is frustrated by it, except at this point, he's starting to almost fade from the picture there. And at what point does he just completely fall out of, the real honest consideration in Thomas Tuchel's mind? Obviously, he's on the squad and he's always going to think about him and see him every day. But at what point does Tuchel put him aside in his mind and say, can't really count on him, need to find somebody else?
Yeah, that's a big problem. And just to paint the picture on the scene over here in England. So I was in a cab in London recently, heading to Chelsea, Man City, I think it was, a few weeks ago. chatting to the cabbie. He happened to be a Chelsea fan, chatting about US soccer, and mentioned Christian Pulisic's name. And then he said, "Who? Who is that?" And then was obviously joking, but he said he's never around. He said, "Would love to see him play more." Like you said, Andy, when he has been fit, he's shown in those spells during the lockdown period. And even at the start of this season, he had a great preseason with Chelsea for the whole preseason. Looked fit, was firing all cylinders, scored against Crystal Palace early in the campaign, and then he hasn't played since. So it's incredibly frustrating for him, as you said. And Nick, with putting our US men's national team hats on, obviously Jamaica and Mexico, those big World Cup qualifiers are coming up next month. Does it feel like he's going to be back fit? Because Tuchel kind of dangled a bit of a carrot there, didn't he? And said, he's close to being back to team training. He just needs to almost get a bit lucky with the pain he's feeling. I mean, is it worth taking a gamble on Pulisic and maybe just having him around the camp, even if he can train a little bit for those qualifiers?
I think almost for his mental health, they need to call him in and have him around the guys and have him, feeling that. And will there be pressure to participate is another question, but you count on Greg Berhalter to manage that. I mean, Andy asked a great question just a few minutes ago. Was the last time he was an absolute star? Now, I take a little bit of umbrage because I loved his game against Mexico in that Nations League. But I also looked it up. He's played 6 times since 2019, since 2020 started. 6 games, period. 6 caps. That's it. And that's a lot. So you really have, he didn't play in the Gold Cup. That's the other thing that's so frustrating. He got that rest time. And so I don't worry about him being put to the side. I think whenever he's healthy, or I'm not put to the side, that being lost out of focus. He's talented enough, and Tuchel knows him well enough that whenever he's healthy, they're going to use him. But I do worry a little bit at some point, is he regarded the way that Jack Wilshere is when their plan was at Arsenal? Well, when they're planning for a season, they think, well, hopefully he'll be around, but let's have guys here because we can't really count on that. I worry about that. I think there's always going to be a place for him with the U.S., and it was a given just 6 months ago that he got given, you know what I mean, that he was going to be the best player in, he was going to be on Dempsey levels. And it is frustrating right now. We've seen him miss an awful lot of time. And I think it stinks. We've watched him gain 10 pounds. He looks stronger. Every time we see him, he looks like he's getting bigger. It seems like he's doing almost all the things right. And because of that, there's no one to blame other than, fate and a body. And that's tough. It stinks for him. And you do feel for him.
You really do. And as the US men's national team waited a long, long time for a superstar of this stature, and Pulisic is clearly that. And the only thing that's keeping him off the pitch and being a genuine star in the Premier League week in, week out is his body and these injuries. And like you said, Nick, it comes down to fate. It may just come down to it can't hold up. Even at Dortmund before this, when he was a lot younger, he had a lot of injury issues as well. My mind kind of goes back to, was he playing too much too young? I mean, over here in England, Michael Owen was a clear case of that, and then he broke down later in his career. I hope that isn't the case with Pulisic. We all hope that, of course. And like you said, I think we all just have huge sympathy with him because you can see he's such a passionate guy that he's got to be so frustrated with how this is unfolding this season at Chelsea because they could use him.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe, studio host for NBC's coverage of the Premier League. Don't forget to hit subscribe to watch highlights all season long, and be sure to tune in for Premier League mornings every weekend at 7 a.m. Eastern. And for even more content, head over to Peacock, where we've got live games, original series, and a dedicated round-the-clock Premier League channel featuring studio shows, classic matches, and much more.